Asian Americans are making headlines for their groundbreaking work in history, social justice, and leadership. Today, we'll meet just some of these trailblazers who are driving this impactful change and also empowering our communities. I'm Erna Valdanillo, and you're watching Asian American Life. All hands in. Safety laws protect New York nail salon workers. War of words on banned books. Meet the librarian who's defending our freedom to read. Plus, giving voice to the belonging. Author Michael Luo's best-selling novel, Strangers in the Land. And Words of Wisdom, an exclusive interview with America's first Asian American female rabbi. This and more on Asian American Life.
I'm Vivian Lee, here at a Brooklyn nail salon. About a decade ago, there was a series of news reports that highlighted the dangers for nail salon workers working in this environment because of toxic fumes as well as airborne particles. And that instituted a series of regulations for new ventilation systems to be installed. But there are thousands of nail salons in New York State, and compliance is not easy or cheap. How expensive?
I had to spend like $30,000.
$30,000
Yeah.
to install a ventilation system.
Yes.
And you got a certificate of compliance.
Yes.
Nail salon owner Tina Zheng displays that certificate right at the entrance. It's the result of an industry reckoning that began in 2015.
The price of nice nails is the first in a series of stories about the industry in New York City, the nail salon capital of the world.
A New York Times investigation stripped the gloss right off of a multi-billion-dollar industry that's competitive but takes its toll on nail salon workers. Wage theft, harassment and discrimination, hours-long shifts with no breaks, and unusually high rates of cancer and reproductive health problems. They're predominantly female, immigrant, and non-English speaking. Kang, a nail technician for nearly a decade, does not want her face shown for fear of reprisals. She's worked while pregnant in a salon that still does not turn on its ventilation system to save on the energy bill. Her son's birth was a complicated delivery. Now 5, he's been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and Kang is seeking treatment for a painful cyst on her chest.
He currently receives speech therapy. He is very active and has delayed learning and does not always respond to the communications. I experienced a serious infection in my right breast, which added to my physical pain and emotional stress. We often exposed to strong chemicals such as acrylic, liquid primer, acetone, stuff like that.
The toxic trio in manicure and pedicure products has been documented for years now. Formaldehyde, a carcinogen. Toluene, linked to kidney and liver damage, birth defects, and miscarriages. And dibutyl phthalate, linked to premature births. New York's then-Governor Andrew Cuomo struck a multi-agency task force to reform the nail salon industry. The New York Bill of Rights for Nail Workers was then passed in 2015. That bill, available in more than a dozen languages, must be posted in every salon in the state. It lists nail workers' rights to meal breaks and personal protective equipment, the minimum wage and what that wage is, and the overtime rate. The reforms also mandated better ventilation in 2016. Called source capture, these systems have to be installed anywhere a mani or pedi service is done, funneling fumes out of the workspace and collecting filing dust separately. The general ventilation system has to pump in fresh air from outside. When COVID hit and salons shuttered, enforcement of these reforms was paused. Now, Westchester County, a suburb of New York City, is the first in the state to allot funding for nail salon visits. Legislators call it a friendly nudge to employers to protect their workers.
You know, these are folks where all they want often is a better life in America, and they're not getting it because they're being exposed to these toxins that no one is taking any action to correct. And so what I'm very proud of is that here in Westchester, we were able to take action.
The point is information for better well-being and to safeguard risk, not to issue violations or punish at all.
Between August and December of last year, representatives of the New York Committee for Occupational Safety and Health, or NICOSH, visited 116 salons in Westchester. That's roughly half of the listed salons in that county. They found only 25% of owners actually knew about the nail salon reforms. 53% did not have working ventilation systems, and only half had posted the Nail Salon Workers' Bill of Rights. Emily Marte participated in those site visits.
It's been a spectrum from do not come into my salon or kicking us out of the salon to what do I have to do? Like I'm doing everything I can, but I didn't know about this. Just tell me what I have to do.
Marte also advises the NICOSH Nail Salon School, where nail salon trainees learn about the findings of this report by NICOSH and the New York Healthy Nail Salons Coalition. Chemical crisis, reproductive harms among nail salon workers in NYC cited higher rates of premature births, miscarriages, and birth defects among more than 300 nail salon workers who were interviewed, compared to the general U.S. population. On top of the toxic trio, workers are regularly exposed to 30 other chemicals or chemical categories in solvents, glues, thinners, and hardeners that the National Occupational Safety and Health Administration warns can cause harm.
We teach them about all of the things that to avoid in a nail salon. So don't give service to people that have fungus or people that come in with a wound. You have to decontaminate this way, not that way.
So Chiara Meng is with Mekong NYC, a community-based social justice organization for Southeast Asian communities. Mekong NYC is about to launch its own nail salon certification school in the Bronx that's free, focused on workers' health and safety, and available in Vietnamese and Cambodian.
We have community members who start out as nail salon workers, as nail salon technicians, and then save up money and then open their own nail salons and become nail salon owners. And so in those positions, we believe that nail salon owners have the responsibility to become educated about the rights and the issues facing their workers.
Back at the nail salon in Brooklyn,
I've been getting my nails done with like acrylic since like middle school. So this isn't nothing new to me, but this is definitely one of the only salons that I feel like it's very welcoming, a lot more cleaner than like the usual ones. A lot of salons, they don't really have like the vent like this.
Tina Zhang is also vice president of the Chinese American Nail Salon Association. She says the extra scrutiny of nail salons and not other businesses that also use chemicals, like hair salons, is discrimination. She also thinks the ventilation upgrades do not fully clear the air. She's planning to overhaul her salon after our visit.
Repainting, change the furniture, because the solution, the smell, when you're using that, it will go into every material, the like sofa, the bed.
So the smell sticks onto the fabric,
yes,
onto the furniture, the seats.
Yes.
So you change everything every few years?
Every few years.
Zhang is the landlord, unlike many salon owners who are tenants. That may be why NICOSH says many choose to pay the $3,000 fine for not being up to code. It's cheaper. It's also easier than wrangling with a landlord who doesn't want to change a thing. For Asian American Life, I'm Vivian Lee.
PEN America has recorded 7,000 instances of banned books in 2024-2025. Classic books, including this one, To Kill a Mockingbird. And it is the librarians who are increasingly finding themselves on the front lines against censorship. I met up with one of those fearless librarians across the river in Hoboken, New Jersey. At first glance, the Hoboken Main Library looks like any neighborhood library, a place to browse and find your next favorite book. But check it out. This library is also a book sanctuary.
Very simply, we believe that every story should have a place in a library. We believe that every reader should have the ability to choose what they want to read.
City leaders in Hoboken are responding to the rise in book bans across New Jersey and nationally, becoming the state's first ever book sanctuary city.
It was a bold move that put the library and its director, Jenny Poo, in the media spotlight.
Nearly 50% of the titles that are being challenged are about LGBTQIA stories and voices. So we would love to see book sanctuaries all over the country, not just in New Jersey and Chicago and Florida, but everywhere, so that these voices, their stories, are told.
I met Pooh on her home turf at the city's main library on Park Avenue. Pooh came on board as director back in 2021, just as the 130-year-old historic building began a multi-million-dollar renovation.
I came at a period of a lot of change and real excitement. And that's what drew me to this, because I knew it was a beloved library just on the cusp of really expanding further than what they could even imagined.
What Pooh did not imagine was that she would find herself in the middle of a culture war. Book bans were and are on the rise at libraries and schools across the country. In June 2023, the library faced criticism and online attacks from conservative groups when they hosted a banned book readathon that included LGBTQ+ themed books, along with a drag queen story hour.
Drag queens read to children this morning at a public library in Hoboken, despite calls to ban the controversial reading.
But Pooh did not shrink back from the backlash. Instead, she led the Hoboken Library to become the first in New Jersey to declare itself a book sanctuary. The city followed suit, and now close to 40 New Jersey towns are book sanctuary cities.
I just think this is a universal value, and it's so fundamentally American. Like, this is who we are, right? You should be able to have the freedom to choose what you want to read and how you think. We provide access to that.
Pooh also helped to pass New Jersey's Freedom to Read Act, cementing protection for intellectual freedom and to support library staff when books are targeted for removal. Her tireless advocacy led her to be named Librarian of the Year in 2024 by the New Jersey Library Association. Did you expect to even be that kind of activist as a librarian?
No, and I would say most of us didn't. We didn't go to library school to kind of be the poster face of this. But we've risen to this, and what I think is so great about this movement is because it actually speaks on the majority. I call it the silent majority. You have a loud minority of people who want to tell you how to read, tell you how to think, tell you what to read, whereas most people don't believe in that. And so that's the stance we've taken, is we're kind of, just uplifting the silent majority.
Pooh, who grew up in Washington State, did not set out to be a librarian. She majored in Asian American Studies at the University of Washington and worked at Wing Luke, an Asian American museum, then in tech. But later in life, she decided to make a change. She went back to school and got her master in library science at Queens College. Like many immigrant children, the library was her happy place.
When I was a kid, my mom would take us to the public library to check out books. And my parents are first-generation Americans, and my mother couldn't get enough of this. So I grew up, really, my love of reading came from going to the public library, getting recommendations from our librarians there, and what I might be interested in reading. And so it's great to come full circle. Here I am directing a public library. Hi, friends.
And she loves being a librarian. She wants to make her library more than just a building to borrow books. At Hoboken, they offer classes like Tai Chi and Mahjong. You could find hygiene and winter care kits, no questions asked. You can go to the Library of Things and borrow things like sports equipment and household items. And yes, that's a unicorn cake pan. They have book lockers for people who can't make it to the library on time. And they recently opened a makerspace where patrons can create and print everything from posters to 3D sculptures. The space pays homage to the library's original dual mission, serving as a training school for adults and a traditional lending library.
If you haven't gone to a public library recently, go stop by and thank your librarian.
And we just want to say thank you, Jenny Poo. For Asian American Life, I'm Ernabelle DeMillo.
The history of the Chinese in America is a heartbreaking and violent story of exclusion, but it's also an inspiring example of resistance and resilience. A compelling story that's captured in the new novel Strangers in the Land by executive editor at The New Yorker and author Michael Luo. Michael, thank you for joining me to talk about your book, Strangers in the Land. I have to say, I was so pleasantly surprised when I started reading the book because I saw that it was a history book with 500 pages. And then when I started reading it, I became engrossed in the personal stories that you put into it and that kind of seamlessly wove it into this great history of the Chinese in America. I know that you have a personal story that inspired this book. Can you tell me about it?
Well, first of all, thank you for that compliment about the book because that is what I was trying to do. In terms of the personal story about what inspired the book, I think there are kind of two inciting incidents. The most immediate is the pandemic and the surge in violence against Asian Americans. And I wrote a piece for The New Yorker that drew on some of this history. And that piece most immediately kind of led to the book proposal and the discussion with publishers. The kind of earlier inciting incident is kind of a more personal thing. That took place in the fall of 2016. This was just before Trump was elected. You could feel in the air this kind of creeping sense of nativism. My family, I have 2 kids, and a woman just brushed past us, aggravated that we were blocking the sidewalk, and she turned to us and said, go back to China. And I was like, are you serious? Like, did you really just say that? This is the year 2016, though, and you're saying this to me. We kind of went back and forth, and she yelled down the street, go back to your effing country. And I, in my attempt to kind of come up with some sort of, smart retort, I was like very pathetically yelled, I was born in this country. And then I wrote an open letter to her, and I told her about this kind of feeling of otherizing that is very common in the Asian American experience. And I wrote about this kind of feeling that I had inside me, this kind of sadness I felt as I was walking away, just thinking about whether my kids, who are 2 generations removed from my parents' immigrant experience, would ever feel like they truly belonged in this country. And that went viral, and the Times actually published the open letter on the front page of the print newspaper, which is an extraordinary thing.
I think most Americans don't know the history of the Chinese in America. Why do you think that is?
History is written by the powerful, and the powerless are often left out of history. So you have to work hard to tell those stories.
Tell me when, how, and why the Chinese immigrants first came to the U.S.
Yeah. So this book starts in the gold rush, and the gold rush was this unprecedented migration from around the world to California and the West Coast. And the Chinese were in that global migration. The vast majority of Chinese migration came from southeastern part of China called Guangdong Province in this kind of area called the Pearl River Delta. There are multiple reasons that the migration seems to have come from this place. There was a lot of turmoil, there was violence, there was economic circumstances, but there's also, I think, a proximity to Western trade that made this people willing, open to venturing across the ocean. There are other things that are kind of known in history as big drivers of Chinese labor, like the building of the Transcontinental Railroad.
Let's talk about the white American reaction to it. A large part of the book, and really what struck me and I thought was so heartbreaking, were these constant stories of the violence.
The first big atrocity took place in 1871, and this was the Chinese massacre in Los Angeles, where I think it was like 19 Chinese were killed and most of them lynched. It's one of the worst mass lynchings in American history. What actually, though, becomes a pattern is what happened in 1885, 1886, which historians now call the driving out. And this was nearly 200 communities in the American West that physically, violently, in many cases, expelled the Chinese from their midst.
When the Chinese Exclusion Act came along, that was the first time that a group of people had been banned from entering the U.S., correct?
Yeah, it's a giant pivot point in American history that the Chinese Exclusion Act represented, that for the very first time we were passing laws regulating immigration designed to keep certain people out based on effectively their race.
It's also a story about resistance and resilience. Tell me about that side of it.
Yeah, totally. The amazing thing is that the Chinese were not driven out. They returned to a lot of these communities. Despite all the efforts to keep them out of America, they continue to find ways to come.
When I was reading these random acts of violence, or mobs or massacres, it really brought to mind the random acts of violence against Asian Americans during the pandemic. What does that say to you about where our society is?
I mean, obviously, when I wrote that piece for The New Yorker that drew on some of this history in the middle of all of that, this kind of surge in violence against Asian Americans, and I was trying to make the point that this has been part of our history, that we've been told to go back to our country for a long, long time. Many Asian Americans are very successful, but yet there is this feeling of otherness that a lot of us feel, and this precarity, I think, is a good word to describe it, of the Asian American experience. And I think that's what a lot of people realized in the pandemic, the precarity of the Asian American experience. What would it take to overcome that? A lot of conversations like this, a lot of people reading this book, a lot of representation, I think.
Why do you think the history of the Chinese in America is important
Yeah.
for people to know?
I mean, Asian American history is American history. That's what I want people to know and believe and realize. I think that when you know history, when you know where context, when you know the stories of a people, it builds empathy. It gives you context for understanding them.
Strangers in the Land by executive editor at The New Yorker and author Michael Luo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great to talk to you, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
I'm Kyung Yoon, and I had the privilege to get up close and personal with Angela Buchdahl, the senior rabbi at Central Synagogue here in New York City, and the first Asian American rabbi in North America.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And it's kind of beautiful. This is sort of this is a scroll that survived the Holocaust.
It's impossible not to feel a kind of ancient wonder when Rabbi Angela Buchdahl opens the Holy Ark at Central Synagogue, one of the oldest, largest, and most influential Jewish congregations in New York City and in the country.
It's my 25th year in the rabbinate, but my 20th year here at Central Synagogue, which is hard to believe.
Buchdahl first arrived as the congregation's senior cantor in 2006. 8 years later, she faced a crossroads: remain in a role she loved or step into a position no woman had ever held at Central Synagogue.
There had not at that point been a female senior rabbi of this congregation. At that time, it's 175 years. And there were very few women leading congregations that were large congregations. And so it felt like there was something impossible about this job as a woman with young kids. But part of it was reimagining what the position could be.
Buchdahl has spent her career reimagining and redefining what Jewish leadership can look like, not only as a woman, but as a Korean American Jew. Stepping into the senior rabbi role meant challenging long-held assumptions about who belongs on the pulpit and expanding the possibilities of what a Jewish leader can be.
I grew up at a time when I never saw myself reflected in the Jewish community at all as a Korean American. And I didn't see myself in a single Jewish book. I certainly didn't see myself represented on the pulpit in any leadership positions, but it was just absent from Jewish spaces. And it's not that there were absolutely no Asian Jews, but they didn't feel comfortable in traditional Jewish synagogues in the time that I was growing up. So they essentially were invisible.
Rabbi Buchdahl was born in Seoul in 1972 to a Korean Buddhist mother and a Jewish American father. When she was 5, the family moved to Tacoma, Washington, where she and her sister grew up at Temple Bethel, the synagogue 4 generations of her father's family had called home.
All of us have experiences of insider and outsider, and I do too as well. Now in some ways you could say I'm a rabbi of a large synagogue, I'm an ultimate insider, but I've never lost the heart of a stranger. I've never lost that feeling of knowing what it's like to not really fit in.
That lifelong awareness of what it feels like to stand on the outside looking in has shaped her leadership and her empathy. And it's why her New York Times best-selling book, published last fall, is titled Heart of a Stranger. It's also a perspective that has transformed Central Synagogue. Under her leadership, the congregation has grown significantly, drawing hundreds into the sanctuary each week for Shabbat services and hundreds of thousands more who join through the live stream.
It always feels very special for me when I have an opportunity to kind of reflect also on my Korean side.
Rabbi Buchdahl also makes time for Asian American audiences. At a recent Korea Society event, she spoke frankly about her Korean identity and how it has shaped her journey, and stayed to sign books for attendees eager to meet her. Her special gift is to connect Korean and Jewish culture through the universal language of music. During a visit to Seoul 2 years ago, she collaborated with local musicians on a mashup of Arirang and Jerusalem of Gold, the unofficial anthems of Korea and Israel. With the heart of a stranger, Rabbi Buchdahl leads with empathy and opens doors between worlds. And through her music, her most personal form of prayer, she brings Jewish and Korean cultures into harmony. A leader who builds bridges by being one. Kyung-yoon, Asian American Life.
We hope you enjoyed this special edition of Asian American Life. And don't forget, you can always watch us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and the CUNY TV app. And be sure to watch next month when we feature the hidden communities of New York City. I'm Erna Beldanillo, and we'll see you next time. Support your favorite programming here at CUNY TV. Please consider donating at cuny.tv.edu/donate.